you fall. Watch you lose in control. I'm seeing red. Watch you rise, watch you fall. Now I'm about to break. Face the pain, no escape. Can you step to this? Face the pain, no escape. Can you step to this? Face the pain. Face the pain, no escape. Can you step to this?
What's going on, fight fans? Welcome to another episode of the Fixed Fights podcast with Kurt and Ben. Today we are joined again by that boxing writer, Jeremy Herriges. Thanks again for joining us, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show again. I'm looking forward to talking about some combat sports.
Yeah. I feel like you like illuminate us, right? We're like maybe slightly above casual boxing fans, and you let us know what's going on in the boxing world without making us feel dumb, which I will say MMA fans, terrible at that. They will make anybody feel dumb. So I appreciate the kinder, gentler boxing world kind of letting me in on what's going on.
Hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words, and trust me, vice versa, it'd be the same thing. I my MMA knowledge, I get mostly from the news. So, and many of your articles as well, Ben. So, I always appreciate your knowledge.
Appreciate it.
Do you ever actively watch MMA, or you just strictly stick to boxing for the most part?
Yeah, especially when I was growing up, MMA was actually right there with boxing. I used to watch it in the early days of UFC. I was a martial artist, so it appealed more to me in that sense. But I did martial arts because my parents wouldn't let me box. So they were like afraid I was going to get my teeth knocked out or something. So I did martial arts and I watched all the guys. And I think just gradually as I got older, I think I just gravitated more towards the storytelling of boxers. I think they have a little bit more longevity in the sport. I think MMA fighters just fight so often that it's a lot easier to get burned out as an MMA fighter and burn your body out because of the activity. I mean, it's kind of like the old school boxers when they used to fight like once a month or 2 times a month, or it can take a much bigger toll, I think, in MMA than boxing in the short term, at least.
Man, we could probably go on forever about why MMA fighters' careers are shorter than boxers, but yeah.
100%.
Also, like boxing has such a sense of history. I feel like I don't know if I've really ever written in detail about boxing, but just following it, reading about it, like this, the sense of history, the stories that like kind of repeat themselves over time, because boxing's such an old sport. Man, makes me want to cover it a little bit. I just got to like learn a whole lot more.
I mean, if you're talking big fight feels, a big boxing fight, especially like a big heavyweight boxing fight, which obviously we're going to see later this year, it's really hard to match. You really get just that big fight, like jittery feels going into it. Yeah,
and it's even this fight that we have, it's still got that big fight feel, even though it doesn't quite have the same impact as Pacquiao versus Spence. There's still that excitement because it's Pacquiao. When you have a figure that's that transcendent, you can't help but pay attention because it's Pacquiao,
I mean, so we can start there, honestly. I think this episode is actually going to come out next week, so we won't necessarily get into like breaking down the fight necessarily this weekend. But yeah, we lost Spence and Pacquiao. Obviously, that's a bummer because that fight was going to be amazing. And talk about longevity in boxing. I mean, Manny Pacquiao started his pro boxing career in 1995, I want to say. And in 2021, he's still fighting, the top guys. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. I guess what I'll ask you is if Manny wins this fight, and obviously he's fighting, I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, Ugas, correct?
You're Dennis Ugas, yep.
Like where does he go from here? I mean, what kind of fight do you think he is going to be looking for?
That's an interesting question. I mean, there are a lot of people that predict that he's going to retire after this one, that this is it. So is that a possibility? Yeah. I mean, at 42 years old, almost 43, I mean, he's really starting to push it, especially in a welterweight division with so many younger, talented fighters. I say the welterweight division is the most loaded division in all of boxing. There's so many good guys that are coming up that are even going to push the guys like Errol Spence out, I think, to be quite honest, that, rather than fight, Errol Spence fighting a guy like Jaron Ennis, I think Errol Spence says, okay, I'll move up to middleweight now. But if he does look for another fight, then I think he goes back to Spence. If Spence up for it, I mean, that retina injury is no joke. I mean, that's a serious one right there.
But that's depending from everything I've heard. Yordenis Ugas is legit as they come, right? Like this is not a pushover fight at all.
No, it's not a pushover fight, and I think a lot of people still question what is Yordenis Ugas' ceiling, and that's hopefully what he's gonna try to prove in this fight, that he has a higher ceiling than maybe others have predicted he's gonna have. I think he's kind of like a B plus fighter. I don't think he's an A level fighter, and I guess it's really a question of what type of 42 is Pacquiao right now.
Right.
2 years away from the sport, I mean, that can do things to you. So there are a lot of question marks, and that adds to the intrigue.
I mean, 2 years ago, Pacquiao looked absolutely phenomenal, starting Keith Thurman, and it was even a shock then that he looked that damn good. And and now 2 years later, I mean, we'll see. If you look at the case for Errol Spence, right, he's coming off that terrible car accident, and now he has the detached retina. He's I believe 33 years old, 32 years old, somewhere in that ballpark. Like, are we worried any chance that Errol Spence doesn't fight again, especially if there's some sort of long layoff?
Yeah, I wasn't worried so much about the car accident. I was at first, but I think he had a great showing against a tough fighter in Danny Garcia in his first outing back. After that wouldn't have been my first choice for a guy to fight. I mean, that's a legit top-notch guy. So the fact that he took that fight and looked so good in it, I think showed that ultimately he's shaken that off from the car wreck. Now the retina, I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, it really comes down to what are the doctors saying? What is the recovery looking like? I think he fights again, but is that become a problematic injury like it was for a Sugar Ray Leonard? That's ultimately what we're going to have to see there. I hope that he's going to be okay. I hope he gets it repaired, and I hope he's back to top form. I think he has at least one more fight, and then if the eye doesn't get injured, it's kind of fight by fight.
Man, looking at the rest of this, I mean, you said welterweight is great right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. Like looking down, like Bud Crawford, Virgil Ortiz Jr., who just fought last week, 2 weeks ago?
Last week, yeah.
Loved what I saw from him. Super violent stuff. Man, who do you like in this division on the come up?
Virgil Ortiz obviously is a name that everyone's talking about, and for good reason. Yeah, he got tested by the Mean Machine Idžius Kavaliauskas in that fight. He didn't get dropped, but he definitely got hurt. But he took it. He survived. He knew what he was doing. He came back. Everybody's going to get rocked, but that fact that he recovered, I think, bodes well for him. And the fact that he's so young. If not him, then my guy, I'm going to keep screaming his name, is Jaron Ennis. I mean, to me, he's really the future of that division. And not to say that Virgil Ortiz isn't, but I think it's like a 1A, 1B right now. And eventually those are going to be kind of like the two kings, kind of like a Spence Crawford as they have been. But I think that's the next tier. That's the next grouping. Plus, they're both, I think, like 23 years old, both at the same age. I mean, loads of time, and they're way above where they should be right now.
And who are those two specifically promoted by? Because I know a lot of boxing, to get the guys in the actual ring together, the promotion has to work, right?
Yeah, well, as far as Virgil's with Golden Boy. He's really the crown jewel for Golden Boy. That's the big thing for them. I mean, they've put all of their eggs in that basket. I mean, they've kind of alienated Ryan Garcia. So really, Virgil Ortiz is their guy. As far as Jaron Ennis, he's had some contractual issues, but he's been kind of a free agent, but he does most of his workings with PBC and Showtime in particular. But he's got a little bit more freedom, and he actually got out of a bad promotional deal, at least what he felt was a bad promotional deal. So he's got a little bit more leeway.
So I think if we can shift gears, I think it's time we need to talk about everybody's favorite subject to talk about, and that is celebrity boxing.
Oh yeah.
YouTube boxing, whatever you want to call it. But we got a big fight next weekend, and this is where, you know, boxing and MMA crosses over, because Jake Paul is fighting Tyron Woodley August 29th, which is weird that they're doing another Sunday card, but I guess they did it for the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight. I mean, it's been a couple months since we've last talked. What are your thoughts now on celebrity boxing and this YouTube boxing and the influx of, I don't know, just these guys dabbling in the sport?
I kind of keep the same opinion. I don't mind it. I don't have a problem with it. I get why they're doing it. It's bringing the social media crowd to boxing, and boxing does need more exposure. They want to make sure that they have eyeballs on it. They want to, spread what they're doing, share some more fighters with a bigger crowd, expand their audience. So I can't really say that I have a problem with it. Is it going to lead to a lasting audience? Maybe, maybe not. But at least for this fight, they're going to definitely have people watching it, because you have Jake Paul, who's, arguably the biggest social media star around. And he is a boxer. He's a professional boxer. He's got the wins on his resume. They are real bouts, maybe not always against the toughest competition. But hey, I'll watch the fight. I'm interested in it. It is a step up. It's a guy that we know is at least going to come into the fight in shape. You guys would probably be able to tell me more what you think about Woodley and about his striking. What you think about him as going into the boxing realm.
He won the title in the UFC on the strength of his punching power. So it would be easy to be like, and he would fool me when he was fighting and think Tyron Woodley can box, because you would see him do little things, and you would see him working specifically with boxing trainers, only boxing trainers. But in practice, and I think Kurt can probably agree, especially towards the end of his MMA career, the output was just completely non-existent, right? He's a guy who hits with, or I should say used to hit with, humongous power for a 170-pound guy. And he kind of fell into a trap of thinking this is the only way I can win a fight.
Right.
But his background, right, is a collegiate wrestler. He's like an incredible athlete, an incredible grappler, but also has the gift of like this extreme one-shot power. And it's always with his right hand. He doesn't jab particularly well. He almost never leads. He's only going to counter-strike in an MMA fight. And when he does lead, it looks probably horrific, especially to somebody who watches boxing, because he's going to be chasing, like literally running his feet across the ring, hammering punches. That said, in his very last UFC fight, Kurt and I were just talking about it before we hit record. He lost, but he was in a slugfest with a legitimate world-class top 10 in the UFC welterweight fighter. He lost that fight. He was dropped and choked, but he had finally a moment that fans had been waiting for, where he just kind of bit down on his mouthpiece and let it go, which often in MMA is really all you need. But I don't know if that answers your question about his boxing skills, but it does. As I'm speaking though, this gets to what makes these fights interesting to me. And it's I want to see what's going to happen. Like, it's not that I'm invested in Jake Paul's celebrity. It's not even that I'm particularly invested in Tyron Woodley. I'm just curious,
Well, and just hearing that assessment, that might be dangerous if he has good power at welterweight. I mean, he's fighting a guy that's, walking around, near 200 pounds, definitely taller, definitely got the reach. And if you try to run in there on him, as he's got those long arms, I mean, you get caught with one of those punches. He does have legitimate punching power, as you guys know. To be able to catch a moving target and turn off their lights with one punch, that's a hard thing for anybody to do. And I don't care who you're fighting. And the fact that he keeps doing it, yes, again, not against the best guys, but he's able to, knock people, senseless with a punch. I mean, I think there's legit power there. Is he a high skilled boxer? No, we can't say that yet. He hasn't really fought a boxer. But again, it's the shock value of it. Yeah, I'll watch that fight. Sure.
The biggest question for me going in, and it's more on the Jake Paul side, because Ben, you summed it up very well. But the question that leaves me with is can Jake Paul take a punch, right? Because we've not seen Jake Paul necessarily take a punch in any of these fights, right? He fought the other YouTube guy, and then he fought Nate Robinson, who looked like he'd done 2 pad sessions before this fight, and then Ben Askren, who, out of shape, doesn't have good hands to begin with. So at the very least, Tyron does hit very hard. He does have good striking. I'm sure Jake's been hit plenty in sparring, but getting out in front of a ton of people on pay-per-view in the middle of the ring is a lot different than sparring. So I really, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to be able to handle it that well. I think if Tyron puts it on him and starts cracking him a bit, he's going to get sloppy. He's going to be backing up, and then I'll just give my pick. I think Tyron's going to stop him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give Jake Paul by decision. I think this one goes the distance. Although if he gets knocked out, I'm okay with that too.
Man, I want to pick a draw. Like, I honestly have no idea. I think it's like, so, I mean, I'll be honest. I thought Ben Askren was going to do way better than he did.
Me too.
I can't wrap my head around. And like you're saying, right, what Jake Paul has done, shutting somebody's lights off. Kurt and I have both had MMA fights. I've had kickboxing fights. What you're describing is true. Like, it's very hard to one punch shut somebody's lights out. At the same time, though, I can't wrap my head around. We're talking about a guy who was a elite college wrestler, UFC champion, defended his belt, yada, yada, yada. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around just how these guys are even on the same plane athletically, but clearly they are. Clearly there's something to that. I gotta, in my head, I want to pick Woodley. I think I not only how is Jake Paul going to handle a shot to the face, how is he going to handle little 5'9" Tyron Woodley hammering away at his body in the clinch, which is something he did a lot of in MMA. But I honestly have no idea. I'm intrigued. This is probably the most intrigued I've been out of any of these fights.
Well, yeah, now you got a guy that's in shape that can really punch. That's a combat. Again, it's a combat sports athlete. So it's someone that's a fighter. And even if he's not a boxer, he's a real fighter, and he's at least going to put in the effort. I don't know what to say about Ben Askren. I mean, he didn't even try.
Payday. That's it, man.
Yeah.
That's all that came out. Yeah.
I got a question for both of you guys, right? Let me ask it this way. How much do you think the continuation of this YouTube boxing, celebrity boxing, is tied to the success of Jake Paul, right? Because let's say Jake Paul goes out there and gets starched this weekend, right? A lot of the aura and the want to watch him is now been dissipated. Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it is tied to Jake Paul and his continued success.
100%. If he loses, I think that's going to be a big dip. Now, if it's competitive and people like seeing it and it's a war between the two guys and there's blood and all that type of stuff flying around, then you've got still have that shock value, that sensationalism, and a good fight's a good fight. People are going to want to see that. If it's a good fight, I think they do it again. He already has the rematch clause built into his contract. So if he loses, he can order that they have another fight. If it's a stinker, then no one's going to want to see it anyway, and it's probably not worth their time. But yeah, I think you're 100% right that this is tied to his success. And I think people are trying to replicate that with other YouTubers. That's the idea. Maybe we can get one of these other guys that's going to make their way up the ranks and maybe can build this mystique, and we can capitalize on their giant social media following and keep this type of thing going. I think that's what Austin McBroom had in mind when he started his, YouTuber, TikTok, social gloves deal. Apparently it didn't make as much money as he liked, and he's getting sued by everybody. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I get the sense that if Jake Paul falls off, right, if there is no, let's say he even gets injured, let's say he can't do this anymore, I don't get the sense that there's anybody kind of waiting in the wings to take his spot. I will say, though, I think short of like getting knocked out basically immediately, I don't see how this is going to be bad for Jake Paul in any way. If he wins, right, I think it's obviously that builds his star power even more. If he's remotely competitive, I kind of put him in the same camp. And I used to say this about Conor McGregor, that he's a guy who can lose and not have his career hurt at all because of how he presents himself and how loyal his fans are. I get that same exact sense from both of the Paul brothers, to be honest. That, I mean, the whole my brother just beat Floyd Mayweather. My brother,
yeah, right.
They can speak that into existence. So even if it's a Woodley win that is boring, and which, by the way, I will say, to tell you about Tyron Woodley, it could be really, really boring because he refuses to lead. But that said, even if it's a boring fight, I think Jake Paul can talk that into a bigger rematch. I think his fans and his style of personality is such that it's really hard for his career to take a big hit coming off of a loss, because his career success is not necessarily tied to him being athletically great. It helps, but I don't think that's why he's here, obviously.
Very true.
Good assessment. Yeah, I agree. It's just interesting. Like, how far can he go? I mean, and if it is a stinker of a fight, then does that hurt him as well? Like, if people do they want to see him? I mean, if he's pressing the action and trying to make it happen, then I think that maybe there's some, okay, hey, I tried to fight and he didn't want to fight me. He could always say that. And yeah, we've seen enough fights like that where one party is doing all the fighting, but I don't see that happening here. I think that they're going to both kind of try to go for it.
I think so too. I hope so.
I agree. I think they're both going to come forward and meet in the middle, and we'll see what happens. Who else on that card should we have an eye on? Because it seems like the card top to bottom is pretty solid.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's on the pay-per-view sector of it, but Charles Conwell, if we were just talking, welterweights, and I think I might be crossing my wires. I think Charles Conwell's actually a super welterweight, but he's an incredibly talented boxer. I'm kind of mystified that he's not going to be on the pay-per-view. I'm like, wait a second, you got one of the best boxers on the entire card and you're not showing his fight on the pay-per-view. What are you guys doing? And now he even added more intrigue, for better or for worse, because he just came out and said, I faked an injury in my last fight so I could get this fight.
Oh, damn.
And he said, I wanted to fight both fights, but my manager said fake the injury and go for this one. So he really kind of threw his manager under the bus. And people are like,
right.
We all know that people do this, but you're not supposed to talk about it. So he kind of shocked the boxing world when he said that. Reporting by Mike Coppinger, said it's all to Mike Coppinger. And I know Charles, Charles, you could give me a call too, buddy. But, I think he kind of did it with an ulterior motive that, maybe he's trying to get out of his managerial contract. And this was his way of kind of, burning the ladder here, saying, hey, you want to hold me to this contract, then I'm going to air your dirty laundry.
Dude, the boxing culture is interesting because that would be career suicide in MMA. If a fighter ever came out and flat out admitted, I faked an injury to get out of a fight, there's no coming back from that in MMA culture, at least.
In boxing, it'll be forgotten about next week. So
that is very true.
Truthfully, I do remember reading a headline about this on like Bad Left Hook or something, like maybe a couple weeks ago, whenever it happened. And here I am forgetting about it 2 weeks later. Well,
and you know what? I think it's more the rationale of why he faked it. Like it's not that he didn't feel confident he could beat the guy that he was going to fight. He most certainly probably would have knocked him out. It was about the money. This other entity, actually it wasn't even for the Showtime card. It was for the undercard on Triller, Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos.
Yes.
That was the fight he was supposed to be on. So they're like, wait a second, they're promising me this much money. Well, but I got these two fights. They're going to be too close and I could get injured. And he wanted to do both of them so he could get all the money. Well, then the fight fell through and he lost all that money. I think it was going to be his highest payday. I think it was $80,000 versus the 13 or 15 he was going to get in the other fight. So he's like, give me the 80. I don't want to get the 15. That's why he did it, or that's why he said he did it. Now he's fighting for the same 15 he would have gotten with the other fight. There's no 80 there.
No.
Man, this card also has Amanda Serrano, who has a couple MMA fights under her belt.
Yes. Well, Amanda Serrano. I when talking about fighters on the card, I was speaking more, who we're not going to see that we should see. Amanda Serrano is to me, if we're talking, again, throwing gender out of it, is one of the most exciting boxers in the game. you know, when people try to rag on women's boxing and things like that, if we're talking about inequalities in female boxing, the 2-minute rounds, I think, has a whole lot to do with that. They're only fighting 66% of the amount of time that men are fighting. And to me, that's unfair. And I've talked to her about it. I've talked to many other fighters about it. And they're all like, yeah, give us 3-minute rounds. You know, trying to have your energy go for a 10-round or a 12-round fight with 3 minutes versus 2 minutes, it's a whole different ball game. And once that gas tank is low, that's when you get knocked out. And Amanda Serrano right now, she's in the 50% KO rating, you know, fighting these 2-minute rounds. If it was 3 minutes, I think she'd be at 70 or 80.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's a stud athlete.
It's just hard to get warmed up and going in 2 minutes, especially a sport like boxing where it takes a little bit of time to get reads and to warm up. And you know what I'm saying? I 100% agree. Fights should be 3 rounds. Is there any reason why they are 2 rounds for pro women's boxing?
And I actually, I want to say I had this conversation with Michaela Mayer, and everybody that goes back and looks at it, no one's ever found a good rationale for why. You know, and the funny thing is that in the amateurs, they fight 3-minute rounds.
What?
If you look at the Brits, they fought 3-minute rounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that makes no sense. That's very backwards, obviously.
Yeah.
Super weird. So if we could shift gears to the rest of the year, there is some big fights coming up. None bigger than Tito Ortiz taking on Anderson Silva. No, I kid. I had to throw that in there. Too much interest in the outside of seeing Tito get beat up. I want to talk about this little, I guess, pseudo heavyweight tournament. Obviously, the top 4 fighters. Anthony Joshua, he's going to be taking on Alexander Usyk. And then, what is it, Saturday, October 9th, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury 3. If we could start on the Joshua Usyk side, I haven't seen a lot of people really talking about it, but man, I watched a lot of Usyk. I think he is really good, and I think he poses a lot of problems for Anthony Joshua in this fight.
Yeah, you know, I always say when I make a prediction, I watch 2 or 3 of the last fights from the fighters, kind of getting a feel for what are they doing for me lately? Not necessarily going back to what they did years and years ago. Where are you at right now? And this is going to be a hard one, because if you just look at Usyk's last 2 fights, they weren't particularly good performances. I was at one of his fights. It was his first fight against Chaz Witherspoon. Yeah, he stopped Witherspoon, but he got punched a lot too, which isn't typical for Usyk, who's such a technical fighter. His reign as a cruiserweight, I mean, he was surgical, and he's not displaying that same ability so far at heavyweight. And I think it's just the size disadvantage, that having to deal with bigger guys, his punching power isn't hitting the same way as it did as a cruiserweight. And that bothers me, because the only way that you're going to really beat Joshua is by bullying him around, doing exactly what Andy Ruiz did. Get right in the center, tee off, and look for that home run shot. And I don't think Usyk can do it. I know what he's going to try to do. He's going to try to box, you know, his socks off. And being at that big of a size disadvantage, I don't think he can do it.
Man, that's sad. I feel like I remember watching Usyk's heavyweight debut on television. I was not there, unfortunately, but and texting with a buddy that was in the crowd as well, and like telling him how excited he should be about this guy moving up to heavyweight in the boxing world. But I think, yeah, I mean, remembering his fight with Chisora, just being like, this guy is too small for this. He's way too small for this.
Yeah, and to put that in context, when you stand next to him, he's still a big dude. But when you're talking about a guy that's, you know, 6'2", 6'3", and, you know, 220s, it's a far cry from a guy that's 6'7", you know, 257 of just pure muscle mass. And it's not all about that. Obviously, you have to be able to take a punch, and you have to have a chin, and Joshua's chin has been suspect. So of course Usyk has more than a puncher's chance. It's just I just don't see it being enough. And he's got big hands. I've shook his hand before. He's got big hands for a guy that's not necessarily that big. And every heavyweight can really hit with some power. But when you're talking about A+ level power like a Joshua, you know, he's going to be feeling things he's never felt before.
Do you think Joshua gets him out of there? Sorry, Kurt.
No, you're good.
I'd have to look at it some more, but my early prediction is, I don't think Usyk's going to be able to stand up to it. His only chance is to be elusive. And if he's being that elusive, then he's not going to have a chance to plant his feet and fire back, and he loses on points anyway. But I think Joshua is going to try to go out there and make a statement. I don't think he's necessarily going to fear him. I think he's going to have more confidence than in his last couple of fights. And I think he does get Usyk out of there.
Then if we shift gears to October now, I'm looking at these headlines right now. Tyson Fury's dad prepared to cancel Deontay Wilder fight. Is this fight like in jeopardy again? Did I miss this?
I mean, the fight's always going to be in jeopardy.
Right, sure.
There's so many questions about what is Fury doing? What's he gonna do? I mean, he's really kind of become unpredictable, and I don't believe any of the conspiracy theories. I don't think he faked COVID. I don't think this, that, or the other. I think this rematch, this trilogy is really kind of cursed. And I think I'm always wrong. I think it happens. Hopefully this time around. But yeah, he was in all honesty, he was having his kid had complications at birth, and apparently was dead for 3 minutes until doctors brought his daughter back.
Oh, wow.
So there was a whole lot of drama there. So his father was saying basically, hey, if he's dealing with family trauma, then I don't want him going into this fight when he can't be thinking about the fight and he's thinking about the welfare of his child. I get it. I would be the same way. You know, it's his daughter, it's her well-being. But then apparently he just said, hey, I'm not talking on social media for the next 7 weeks. I'm shutting down. I'm going to camp. I'll see you guys October 9th, which seems to signal that all's well. His daughter's okay, and he can focus. So he says it's on.
Let's hope.
So.
Let me, not to get too off topic here, kind of on topic, who's the biggest star of the three, take out Usyk, of the three heavyweights here? Because I feel like most people have this weird sort of love for Tyson Fury. I don't know if it's weird necessarily, but it seems he's very endearing, I should say.
I think it's been a weird up and down for all three of them. Wilder's always been on the lower level of the other two, I would say, just because people always question his technique and his ability to really polish up his skills as a boxer. I think that's changed a little bit. I think Deontay has risen as more and more training footage. I think people are starting to buy into his dedication. I think people are starting to buy into Malik Scott. And I will say that as soon as I heard Malik Scott was going to be his trainer, I didn't necessarily think it was the right move. I thought he should have had a little bit more separation, but I always said that Malik Scott is a great trainer. He knows his stuff. He's a great boxing mind. And I always thought he needed less familiarity, but it seems like he's really taking Malik at his word and he's really following his instructions. He is bringing a ton of focus to this because he's axed out 90% of his contacts, including me. He's completely ghosted me. He was a guy that I used to always had an open invite to camp. I could just pretty much go on there and say, hey, Jay, I'm going to be in Tuscaloosa. Can I come into camp? Done. No problem. You tell me when, we'll get you in there. Now I can't get anybody on the phone. It's changed. And it's not because I said anything bad. It's just the last fight, he gave too much of himself away to the media. He was too unfocused. I saw it that his intention was gone. It was media. Now it's, you're not invited. It's me time. I need to focus so I can do my thing. So I respect that. Out of all three, I think Fury's taken a massive hit, especially in the United States. I think this is, I think Joshua's back on top.
I mean, I will say it's music to my ears about Deontay Wilder. I know maybe boxing fans didn't like him. Coming from an MMA background, I love the way Deontay Wilder fights. I love the fact that he has this like power switch always chambered. There's a chance that a fight can always end, which is, to be honest, like what kind of MMA brings to the table. It's the instantaneous ending of a fight.
True.
And I always like the idea of having an American heavyweight undisputed champion, you know?
Yeah.
So I always find myself rooting for a guy like Deontay Wilder.
I'll tell you Deontay's Achilles heel here for me isn't necessarily about can he put the skills together, which is at 35, that's hard to do, to kind of revamp it. But he has had the gift of time. He has been training all this time. So there is something to be said for that. To me, it's the health of his right hand. He breaks it often enough because of how hard he throws it that it could go at any time. He throws just one right hand that lands the wrong way or at the wrong spot. That thing is going to break, and he's without his best weapon in that fight. And if that happens, he's in real trouble against Tyson Fury.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fight is just so intriguing. I mean, almost like these cancellations, they suck at the moment, but it almost makes you like salivate more and more for the fight. And it's good to hear that Deontay Wilder is more focused, and because again, like the last fight ended rough. Everything after the fight wasn't the best look, but it's good to see that he's refocused and he's back in the gym. And again, like you talk about, the guy's right hand is one of the most honestly scariest weapons in all of combat sports, right? The guy can literally put anybody's lights out at any time. We've seen his power carry in later rounds. We've seen him get guys out of there early. I can't freaking wait, man. The only thing I like big fights with countrymen in their country, right? And I feel like there could be no bigger fight than Joshua Fury in like Wembley Stadium in England, right? It just feels like it would be so freaking big. But, I mean, I guess the downside of that is maybe you get Joshua Wilder, which would also be freaking awesome.
Any fight at this point that's for all the belts, I think is history making. I mean, that's what everybody wants at this point. That's why people got excited when we were talking about Fury versus Joshua and just going past Wilder when we thought, even if it was going to be in Saudi Arabia, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to Saudi Arabia, I guess, it's sorry, I'm going, pack my bags. Now that only lasted for a few hours until the injunction came in from the judge later saying, no, that's not going to happen. But anytime that can happen, but you're right. If you could get two guys at Wembley that the fans care about, that's a whole different level. And I'm going to Wembley if that's the case.
I love it.
That'd be amazing.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna take a shot at Bellator, man. Doing like these big country fights in like Mohegan Sun, Connecticut, or Vacaville, Oklahoma.
In MMA, all too often is like the two best British fighters going head to head. Finally, in Thackerville, Oklahoma. God, I can't believe it. But that's kind of why I love MMA. It's silly like that. Yeah,
no, I hear you. And you have Vegas, which is, and obviously with COVID, it's changed a few things. If that's the other game changer, what's it going to be looking like a few months from now? I mean, does it get, just as bad as it has been? Does that change things? Does that change travel arrangements? I mean, that's a bit of a wild card too.
Absolutely. Speaking of a guy looking to unify all belts, Canelo Alvarez, Caleb Plant is finally official. Canelo Alvarez holds 3 of the 4 belts. Caleb Plant holds the other. I mean, you can't say enough good things about what Canelo is doing right now. He's fighting tough fighters. He's looking to unify all the belts. He said he's looking to move up to 175, possibly after this fight Derevyanchenko maybe. I love what Canelo's doing, and I honestly really like this Caleb Plant fight.
I do too, and it's funny that when it fell through, a lot of people were trying to put a positive spin on it. Like, well, was Caleb Plant really the guy that we wanted him to see? Well, I'd take a Bivol fight over Caleb Plant. No, to me, I wanted to see Caleb Plant. Like to me, it's not even so much about just unifying because, we can see that. And I don't think anybody would be surprised, if Canelo unifies against Caleb Plant. But my question mark is, how good is Caleb Plant? We really haven't seen what he's capable of yet because of his level of opposition. He hasn't really fought a really high level boxer yet. All the guys that he's fought have been pretty mediocre, to be honest. If we're talking Feigenbutz, if we're talking even the guy he won the title from, Uzcategui, I mean, these aren't guys that most people know or are excited about. Now, he looks great when he's fighting them. But he's fighting guys that he's having an easy time with. Mike Lee, he knocked down 5 times in 3 rounds, and nobody was surprised by that. Now, what can he do against Canelo? Is he going to do better or worse than Billy Joe Saunders? That's going to tell us his ceiling.
I mean, he's big though, right? Like from what he looks enormous.
Caleb Plant?
Yes.
No, he really is. I mean, compared to Canelo, yeah, but
yeah,
that's
I guess that's mostly what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, they have him listed as 6 foot, and I've been, around Caleb several times. He hasn't even known it, but I mean, we've like bumped into each other. And even though he's listed at 6 foot, I mean, we're about the same size, or maybe I'm taller than him. He looks more like he's like 5'11" and a half. So you would be surprised when you see him, and he is very lean, being a guy that's a super middleweight. He doesn't look bulked up. He's pretty cut. I would definitely say that Canelo is still going to be the wider, stronger guy, much stronger guy. And the proof is just the KO ratings. He has that one punch knockout power. Caleb has power, but it's more of an accumulation. It's not going to be that one shot that does it.
I mean, we saw Billy Joe Saunders have some success in the fight. What can Caleb Plant do to offset just the storm when it gets rolling with Canelo Alvarez?
I think he's going to have to try to operate with Billy Joe Saunders' same strategy, but do it better. Yeah. Obviously, I think that idea of boxing, staying outside, being the counter puncher, utilizing his quickness, his foot speed, lateral movement, all things that he's going to try to do. The problem is that every time we see Caleb Plant or Canelo Alvarez in those positions, he's better at doing all of those things than every single guy he fights. He knows how to cut off the ring. He's smaller, so he's even quicker than the guys that he's fighting, but he's wider and even stronger than the guys that he's fighting. I mean, he really has developed into a tremendous knockout puncher, especially considering where he started.
Yeah, he's somebody that when I watch boxing, I am like blown away by the skill level, right? Yeah. Everything is deliberate. Everything looks perfect. Everything looks beautiful. The sounds of Canelo Alvarez like landing perfect combinations is unreal. Is he your pound for pound best boxer right now?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And I think by a long shot until someone else is able to make a dent in his armor. To me, it's pretty much, it's always going to be an easy call. And again, he's still young and he's still got time. Yeah. I say he does, like a Rocky Marciano, he retires at the age of 34 and he rides off into the sunset and becomes a promoter himself, or does whatever he wants to do, because he already has a boatload of money that he can pretty much, cash his own checks and run his own show. We talked about Manny Pacquiao, a young guy that just had this boatload of potential, that it got unlocked the right way and he's flourished. Started off as like a light flyweight, was Pacquiao, at 106 pounds. And here he is fighting as a welterweight. Well, Canelo's kind of done the same thing, starting in those welterweight areas. Now can be able to move up to light heavyweight, and the power's still there. He's carried his power up better than Pacquiao did. Then again, he didn't have to traverse, 8 divisions to do it, right, like Pacquiao did. So, but same high level potential that only come around once in a blue moon.
Good looking guy too.
Yes, he's
one of the most handsome people in all of combat sports.
It helps with marketability, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Do you think he tries to fight? I said Derevyanchenko before. I met Artur Beterbiev. Do you think he goes for that fight next?
Either Beterbiev, or if he fights Bivol, because Bivol said he'll come down to 168 given the right amount of time. So if he's successful against Caleb Plant, I think Bivol first and then Beterbiev, and from there, I mean, depending on the timeline, maybe a couple more fights, or maybe he's done. I don't know.
Yeah. Dude, that Beterbiev fight would be unreal.
Well, and here's
a hammer.
We talk about these guys, and there's always somebody coming up through the ranks. There's always going to be that fresh face because again, the other guy that we're going to be talking about is going to be Edgar Berlanga. A guy at super middleweight that's big, that's strong. He still needs to refine his technique. He still needs more experience. But if Canelo's consumed for the next 2 years, a guy like Berlanga is going to be building himself up, and then we're going to be speaking about him as the next young kid that's developed, that's going to be the next challenger. There's always somebody else that's coming up.
A tale as old as time. And something I never see this in MMA. He's talking about going out of you're talking legitimately about him going out on top and truly riding off into the sunset, not disappearing and coming back to do bare knuckle boxing in a couple years, not disappearing to come back and box Jake Paul. I guess Floyd Mayweather does that, but it's crazy that it's we can talk about it, him retiring and staying retired, and nobody's going to begrudge him for it. I guess maybe some people do. I don't know boxing fans quite so well, but just these kind of cultural differences between boxing and MMA are always interesting to me.
Well, and I think with any athlete, especially one that's been at the top of the mountain, a lot of times they get so seduced by their greatness, they have that hard time letting go of it. And, it's like I have to have someone prove to me that I'm not there anymore, but I could still do it. I still think I can do it, even after I lose or whatever. And it's just gone at that point. The magic's gone. And sometimes they can't just accept that. Boxers every once in a while can, but it is still a rarity. Last guy that I thought really did a good job with it was Andre Ward. I mean, Andre Ward rode off into the sunset. Now everyone kept saying, well, come fight me, come fight me. He was comfortable with what he did. I proved everything that I had to do. I'm good. And he always says, people keep talking about me coming back. I'm gone. I'm finished. I'm good. And he's going to be better off for it in the future, I think. Yeah,
I respect it. I mean, I haven't seen it too closely in boxing, but yeah, MMA, we get it where the guy just, it gets down to 4 or 5 knockouts in a row, and we're just by the end of it, it's like, geez, man.
Or how about how about Khabib? I mean, he
well, that was it. That was the one.
That was it. That was the one. And
George St. Pierre was another one that finally, he rode off into the sunset.
Yeah, and he was really straddling that line though too, because you had the feeling that we could already see the wear there,
Yeah, you got time.
I think on the other, we talked about this jokingly, Tito Ortiz on the other end of the spectrum. You have this thing in MMA, and I think Tito is the brightest light of it, where he still thinks I'm the fucking showstopper. He thinks legitimate. Remember he had that pay-per-view with Chuck Liddell, I believe. Oh,
dude, that was the ultimate. Come on, dude.
He thinks, we ran the numbers, we did so well in 2002
dude, it sold
or whatever.
22,000 pay-per-views.
And I'm sure there's that level of disillusion in boxing for sure. But I think there's also more often it feels like guys that are able to kind of better objectively look at their career and make decisions.
Well, in the case of Tito, I think he's a little special because I think he's crazy. I think he's out of his mind.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's a different ballgame. I actually, I know I don't write about MMA, and that's not my forte. One of the rare MMA interviews I had was with Chuck Liddell. And it was actually a film review because he was doing a movie. And so I reviewed it and I was interviewing him for it. And, we had this conversation about, all right, now, are you really done? He's like, yeah, I think I'm done.
Jesus.
And I'm like, even then he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm done. And I'm like, you're pretty sure you're done, and this is after everything, he's been knocked out all these times. Tito's knocked him out at this point. And I'm like, man, he was even still having a hard time saying that though.
Well, he was just shouting out bare knuckle the other day. Jesus, I hope you don't see Chuck Liddell in bare knuckle boxing.
I know. Yeah. Can you imagine that? He just needs to be done, especially a guy that's taken that many shots. I mean, and bad shots.
Yeah, dude, his chin went in 2008 and we're in 2021 now.
You mean, hey, are we going to see Chuck Liddell versus Ken Shamrock in bare knuckle boxing?
Probably. That's not off the table.
They would probably think that would be a good idea, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I think two guys that would be like, okay, I'll do one more fight. Why not?
Yeah, fuck it. Why not? Jesus. Yeah. Sure. All right, Jeremy. So to end, why don't you tell us what else is on the slate for boxing the rest of the year? What fights can we look forward to? What fighters should we be looking forward to the rest of this year and going into 2022?
Yeah, as far as fighters to be looking to, I think the best fights probably haven't been signed yet, to be quite honest. I think we have some fights that are made. I know that, Stephen Fulton versus Brandon Figueroa is going to be happening in the near future. That'll be a very interesting fight that'll unify some titles. How good is Figueroa? How good is Fulton? I mean, they're both very, very good fighters. You can make arguments for both in that one. Fulton, I mean, they both throw a ton of punches. It's going to be an exciting fight to watch. That's one that I like that's signed. But as you said, it's going to be the ones that haven't been signed yet that we're going to be looking for in not just November, but December that are on the precipice. I know that we always say that Canelo versus Plant, they've agreed to terms, but until that paper is signed and the contract's there and we have a date and a venue, anything's up for grabs. That, I think, is going to be the biggest fight of the year, actually, even bigger than – I think that fight can potentially be bigger than Wilder versus Fury. But again, what other fights are going to happen? Who's going to come out? Gervonta Davis, who does he fight next? I think that's going to be an interesting one, and not a lot of people are talking about it. I think Gervonta Davis has maybe 2 or 3 fights left before he's got to be concerned about his freedom, because people forget that he's got a major court case looming in the background.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on for sure.
So yeah, I think he's looking for the money right now. I think he's looking for money fights.
Trying to get it in before he can. I mean, dude, we talked about it last time. I mean, that lightweight division is just so damn good. Any of those guys, you match them up and it would just be fireworks.
Well, and think about this. If you have Gervonta versus Ryan Garcia, that's a huge fight just because of their followings and their social media presence.
Right.
But they're boxers that can box that have a social media presence.
I know.
I would love to see Ryan Garcia fight more often. I feel like he has all this potential, and I'm personally excited about him. Like beyond, I had no idea about his social media otherwise, but I feel like he fights so infrequently.
Any of those three, whether we're talking about any combination, Davis, Garcia, or Teofimo, Devin Haney.
Yeah.
Even though Devin Haney's really slipped on the reputation chart with all those guys, you still throw him into the mix and it's still intriguing because he still has that potential. But yeah, Teo, I mean, Lomachenko is still an intriguing fight. Still a guy that's got it. You throw all those guys, but I feel like they have to start fighting each other if they really want to be making bank,
Yeah, sign me up for those.
Absolutely.
Ooh, one more. Jamel Herring versus Shakur Stevenson.
There you go.
That's a good fight. And that one's coming up. I know a lot of people are writing Jamel Herring off. I didn't think Jamel Herring was going to beat Carl Frampton, and he knocked him out. So let's see it.
That's in October, right? Do I see this right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big fight.
I like it.
Love it, man. Love it. Jeremy, thanks again. We really appreciate you coming on. Please tell everyone where they can follow you, where they can read your work, watch your interviews.
Yeah, you can read my work at fansided.com/boxing. My YouTube channel, That Boxing Writer, is where I have a lot of interviews, and I've got a new podcast, That Boxing Writers Podcast, which you can find virtually anywhere. Just having some fun talking to boxers.
Awesome.
Man, good stuff. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. Definitely going to do this again sometime soon.
Sounds good, fellas. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Face the pain.